My name is Grace, and for a long time, I believed I was the luckiest woman in the world. I believed it with the fierce, unblinking certainty of a zealot, the kind of faith that feels warm and fortifying right up until the moment it shatters. Kartik wasn't just my boyfriend. He was the architect of my reality, the curator of my joy, my everything. He didn't just enter my life, he consumed it, painting it in colors so vibrant, so intoxicatingly brilliant, that I didn't realize they were hiding the gray, unyielding bars of a cage. He started by building me a beautiful world, a bespoke universe designed for an audience of one me. It was a world filled with grand romantic gestures, whispered promises in the dark that felt like sacred vows, and declarations of a love so intense, so all-encompassing, that I thought it could only exist in the fevered pages of a novel or the golden-hued scenes of a movie. I was 24 when I met him, a junior graphic designer with a small apartment, a close circle of friends, and a life that felt comfortably, pleasantly my own. 6 months later, my life was no longer my own. It was ours. And I thought that was the most romantic thing in the world. He made my 25th birthday a fairy tale. It wasn't just a party. It was a production, an immersive experience in the cult of Kartik's love for Grace. Our apartment, a chic loft space he'd insisted we get together after only 6 months, was transformed. He had strung hundreds of tiny, warm-toned fairy lights across the high ceiling, so it looked like we were standing under a canopy of captured stars. The air was thick with the scent of lilies, my favorite, their pristine white heads nodding in dozens of crystal vases placed on every available surface. Champagne flowed from bottles that were never allowed to empty, music from a playlist he'd spent weeks curating pulsed softly, and at the center of it all was Kartik, his arm wrapped possessively, securely around my waist, his eyes never leaving my face. He made a speech that night, raising a flute of bubbling champagne to the room full of our friends, but speaking only to me. To Grace, he'd said. His voice a low magnetic hum that made the very air in the room crackle. The ambient chatter died down, everyone turning to listen. The woman who walked into my life and made everything else fade to black and white. She is my world, my gravity, my reason. I was just a man before I met her, drifting through a life I thought was full, but now I know what it means to truly live. To my Grace. My friends sighed in a collective, appreciative wave. The women, Maya included, looked at him with an undisguised, almost comical envy. The men clapped him on the back, grinning, acknowledging the high bar he had just set. I felt a dizzying blush creep up my neck, a potent cocktail of pride and adoration. This was love. This overwhelming, cinematic, all-consuming feeling. This had to be it. I didn't see the subtle, insidious warning in his words then. My world. My gravity. My reason. The language of ownership, cleverly disguised as devotion. But I soon learned that fairy tales often have a monster hiding in plain sight. And usually he's the one pretending to be Prince Charming. Later that night, long after the last of our friends had stumbled out into the cool pre-dawn air, we were curled up on the sofa, surrounded by the beautiful debris of the party. My head was on his chest, the steady rhythm of his heartbeat a soothing drum against my ear. His fingers were tracing lazy, possessive circles on my arm. I felt a profound sense of peace, a perfect, settled contentment that felt like the final satisfying click of a lock falling into place. My phone, which I'd left on the coffee table, buzzed. I reached for it, a tired, happy smile already on my face, assuming it was another late-night birthday message from a tipsy friend. It was from Maya, my best friend since kindergarten, the woman who was less a friend and more a non-biological sister. Happy birthday, superstar. So sorry I had to work late and missed the speech. Heard it was epic. Miss you like crazy. Let's do our own celebration this weekend? I smiled, my thumb hovering over the keypad to type a reply, my mind already composing a witty response. But before I could, Kartik's hand covered mine, his fingers surprisingly cold, his grip firm. Who's that? His voice was different. The warm melodic hum that was his default setting was gone, replaced by a flat, hard edge that made the fine hairs on my arms stand up. Just Maya, I said lightly, trying to pull my hand from under his. wishing me a happy birthday. He didn't let go. He leaned over, his body suddenly tense, and read the message over my shoulder. And then it happened. The change. It was so swift, so absolute. It was like watching a light switch being flipped off, plunging a warm, bright room into a cold, terrifying darkness. His charm, the easy, magnetic charisma he wore like a bespoke suit, evaporated in an instant. His face, which moments before had been a mask of soft, post-party adoration, was now a portrait of cold, paranoid rage. "Superstar," he said, his voice a low snarl that seemed to vibrate through the sofa cushions. "Why is she calling you that? Is that some kind of code? Some little name one of your secret admirers uses?" I stared at him, my mind struggling to catch up with the sudden, violent shift in the atmosphere. It was like emotional whiplash. "What? Kartik, no. Don't be silly. It's just a nickname she made up for me in college. She's called me that for years. Miss you like crazy?" He spat the words out as if they were poison, his grip on my hand tightening. "She saw you last week. Why does she miss you so much? What aren't you telling me?" He snatched the phone from my hand, his knuckles white. He began scrolling furiously through my message history with Maya, his breathing growing louder, more ragged in the quiet room. "Kartik, stop it, you're scaring me," I whispered, my heart beginning to hammer against my ribs. This wasn't the man I knew. This wasn't the man who had just called me his world. "Am I?" he said, his eyes dark and stormy, finally lifting to meet mine. "Or are you scared I'll find out the truth? That you're cheating on me, betraying me, making a fool out of me with all these secret little messages and nicknames?" "There is no secret," I cried, trying to stand, but he pushed me back down onto the sofa with a hand on my shoulder, his strength startling. "It's Maya, my best friend. You know that. Friends don't talk like that," he roared, his face contorted into a mask of ugly suspicion. The man who had built this fairy tale for me just hours ago was gone, replaced by this terrifying, irrational stranger. I tried to calm him down, to reason with him, my voice shaking. "Kartik, please listen to me." I reached for his arm, but he flinched away from me as if I had burned him. He stood up, pacing the length of the living room like a caged tiger, his hands clenched into tight, white-knuckled fists. He picked up an empty champagne glass from the table, its delicate stem looking fragile and dangerous in his grip. "You're lying to me," he whispered, his voice dangerously quiet now, which was somehow more frightening than the roaring. "I'm not, I swear on my life." With a guttural scream of pure animal rage, he hurled the glass against the far wall. It didn't just shatter. It exploded in a shower of glittering crystalline dust. I flinched hard, a scream catching in my throat, my hands flying up to cover my face. He didn't look at me. He looked at the wall, at the sparkling spray of broken crystal. Then, he did something so unexpected, so manipulative, that it would become the cornerstone of his control over me. He bent down, his movements jerky, and picked up a large, jagged shard of glass from the floor. He held it to his own wrist, the sharp, glittering edge pressing into the pale skin, a single perfect drop of blood welling up where it made contact. "Don't you see what you do to me, Grace?" he sobbed, the rage instantly, seamlessly replaced by a flood of gut-wrenching tears. His entire body slumped, and he sank to his knees amidst the debris. "The thought of losing you, the thought of someone else having even a tiny piece of you, it destroys me. It makes me want to die. I love you so much it makes me crazy." My fear for myself was instantly, completely eclipsed by a tidal wave of fear for him. In that moment, the abuser became the victim, and I became his willing accomplice. I scrambled off the sofa and knelt in front of him, my hands hovering, afraid to touch him, afraid of the glass. "Kartik, please," I begged, my own tears now flowing freely, hot and fast. "Please put that down. I'm not cheating. I would never, ever betray you. I love you more than anything." He looked up at me, his face a mess of tears and theatrical anguish. He had taken my reality, a simple, innocent text from my oldest friend, and twisted it into a weapon against me, making me the author of his pain. I spent the next hour on the floor with him, calming him down, reassuring him and apologizing. I, the birthday girl in the wreckage of my own celebration, was apologizing profusely to my boyfriend for receiving a text message. When he was finally calm, the shard of glass safely discarded in the bin, he pulled me into a desperate, clinging hug, his body trembling against mine. "I'm sorry, baby," he whispered into my hair, his voice hoarse. "I just love you too much. It will never happen again, I promise. I'll be better." And I, drenched in his manufactured grief and my own misplaced guilt, believed him. I wanted to believe him more than I had ever wanted anything in my life. That night established the rhythm of our toxic dance. A violent, terrifying storm of jealousy and control, always triggered by something impossibly laughably small. A friendly chat with a male cashier at the grocery store, a like on an old Facebook photo from a college friend I hadn't spoken to in years, a work lunch that went 5 minutes too long. These storms would be followed, inevitably, by the flood. His flood of tears, his dramatic, soul-bearing apologies, and his fervent, desperate promises that it would never ever happen again. He was so convincing. He would cry with such pain, such genuine seeming remorse, that I would end up comforting him, my own very real fear and anger completely forgotten, erased and replaced by a crushing sense of guilt for having caused him such unbearable pain. He called his possessiveness love. He had a whole lexicon for it. A twisted dictionary where every form of control was a synonym for devotion. His paranoia was just a profound, overwhelming fear of losing me, a testament to the depth of his feelings. "No one will ever love you as much as I do, Grace," he would say, his eyes boring into mine, his hands gripping my shoulders. "That's why it hurts me so much. Other people, they don't care enough to feel this way. Their love is shallow. Ours is deep. It's real." Slowly, systematically, and with the chilling precision of a master strategist, he isolated me. Started, of course, with Maya. After the birthday incident, every interaction with her became a landmine. "I'm not comfortable with her," he said one night, his voice laced with a faux vulnerable sadness. "The way she talks to you, calling you superstar. It's disrespectful to our relationship. She doesn't understand what we have. She's trying to pull you back into your old life, a life without me." He would pick fights after every time I saw her or spoke to her, manufacturing slights, twisting her words, making the experience so stressful, so filled with anxiety and preemptive damage control, that I began to avoid her calls, letting them go to voicemail, my heart pounding with guilt. The final break came when he overheard me on the phone with her, making tentative plans to meet for coffee. After I hung up, he didn't yell. He did something far worse. He gave me the silent treatment for 2 full days, living in the apartment like a cold, angry ghost, his presence a constant, oppressive weight. He would eat alone, sleep on the very edge of the bed with his back to me, and look right through me as if I didn't exist. By the 3rd day I broke. I found him staring out the living room window, his shoulders slumped in a performance of profound sorrow. "I'll stop talking to her," I whispered, the words tasting like ash in my mouth, a betrayal of a 15-year friendship. "If it makes you happy, I'll stop." He turned, and the relief on his face was like the sun breaking through clouds after a long storm. He rushed to me, pulling me into a tight, suffocating hug. "Thank you, baby," he breathed against my hair. "You see? It's for us. To protect us. Our world doesn't need any intruders." He stood over me, his hand on my shoulder, as I deleted her number from my phone. Then he had me block her on every social media platform. With each tap of the screen, I felt a piece of myself being carved away. But his approval, his happiness, that was the drug I had become hopelessly addicted to. My support system was dismantled, one friend at a time, until his was the only voice I could hear, the only reality I was allowed to inhabit. He gaslit me until I began to question my own sanity, my own perception of reality. At a colleague's party, I had a brief, polite, and utterly professional conversation with another man from a different department about a work project. I was aware of Kartik watching from across the room, his jaw tight, but I thought I had done nothing wrong. I had been careful, my body language closed, my tone professional. We left 2 minutes later, Kartik claiming he had a sudden headache. In the car, the silence was thick and suffocating. When we got home, he exploded. "You were flirting with him all night. Don't you dare deny it. I saw the way you were looking at him, touching his arm, laughing at his stupid jokes. You embarrassed me, Grace. You made me look like a fool in front of my peers. I was just talking to him, Kartik. For 5 minutes. I didn't touch his arm." My protest was weak, already faltering under the force of his conviction. "You're lying. You're a liar. You were throwing yourself at him. Do you have any idea how that makes me feel? Do you even care about my feelings at all?" He backed me into a corner of the kitchen, his voice rising, his body radiating a contained violence that terrified me. By the end of the night, exhausted and confused, I had apologized. I was the one who was sorry for being too friendly, for not considering his feelings, for my own perceived transgressions. I began to believe it. Maybe I was the problem. Maybe I was just a naturally flirty person who didn't realize the signals she was sending. My world shrank to the size of our apartment, my reality defined by his moods, his rules, his suffocating, all-consuming love. The walls of the cage were no longer visible. They had become the walls of my own mind. The severing of my friendship with Maya was not a clean cut. It was a slow, agonizing amputation performed without anesthetic. Kartik, having won the initial battle, was determined to salt the earth so nothing could ever grow there again. He understood that a bond like ours, forged in the fires of awkward adolescence and cemented over years of shared secrets and unwavering support, couldn't be broken with a single argument. It had to be methodically dismantled piece by painful piece. He began by monitoring my phone with an obsessive vigilance. He would casually pick it up to check the time, his eyes flicking to the top of the screen to see if any new notifications had appeared. He had me turn off previews for my messages, claiming it was for our privacy, but I knew it was so he couldn't see a name flash across the lock screen. The paranoia was a constant, humming presence in our home, like a faulty electrical wire hidden in the walls, always threatening to spark. One evening I slipped. I was scrolling through old photos on my phone, a wave of nostalgia washing over me, and I lingered for a moment on a picture of Maya and me on our college graduation day, our faces flushed with triumph and cheap champagne. Kartik from across the room saw the shift in my expression. "What are you looking at?" he asked, his tone instantly suspicious. "Nothing, just old pictures," I said, quickly locking my phone. It was the wrong move. The guilt in my voice, the haste of my actions was all the proof he needed. He was across the room in 3 strides, his hand outstretched. "Give me the phone, Grace." "Kartik, don't be ridiculous. Give it to me," he repeated, his voice dangerously low. "Unless you have something to hide." Defeated, I handed it over. He unlocked it. He had insisted on knowing my password months ago, another move disguised as trust and transparency, and went straight to my photo gallery. He found the picture. He stared at it for a long silent moment, his face hardening. "You still think about her," he said, his voice flat. "After everything I told you, after she tried to poison you against me, you still miss her." It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. "She's my friend," I whispered, the words feeling weak and futile. "Was my friend. Of course I miss her sometimes. So I'm not enough?" He shot back, the familiar performance beginning. The wounded eyes, the tremor in his voice. "This life we have, this love. It's not enough to make you forget about her? What did she give you that I can't?" The argument that followed lasted for hours. It twisted and turned, him a master prosecutor, me a fumbling defendant with no viable defense. By the end, he had successfully reframed my nostalgia as a profound betrayal of our love. The only way to prove my loyalty, to demonstrate that he was enough, was to erase her completely. He sat beside me, his arm draped around my shoulders in a gesture that felt less like comfort and more like a guard's hold. and he guided me through the process of deleting every photograph, every saved voicemail, every digital trace of Maya from my life. "It's better this way, baby," he murmured as I wiped away 15 years of memories. "A clean slate. Just you and me. That's all we need." With Maya gone, my world became smaller, quieter. My other friends fell away more easily. I was always busy, always had a prior commitment with Kartik. The excuses became a habit, and eventually the invitation stopped coming. My isolation was nearly complete. All that was left was my job. My work as a junior graphic designer wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. It was a space where I had a small measure of autonomy, where my talent was recognized, where I was Grace, the designer, not just Kartik's girlfriend. He began to resent it. He hated my late nights, my work dinners, the easy camaraderie I had with my colleagues. He saw every deadline as a rival for my attention, every coworker as a potential threat. The campaign to make me quit was subtle at first. He would call me incessantly throughout the workday, his texts a constant stream of, "What are you doing now? Who are you with? When are you coming home?" If I didn't reply within minutes, it would trigger a barrage of anxious, then angry messages. He started showing up at my office unannounced, bearing lunch or flowers, a gesture that my coworkers saw as romantic but I knew was a surveillance mission. He was checking up on me, marking his territory. The final push came after my company landed a big new client. I was assigned to the project team, an exciting opportunity that meant more responsibility and a potential promotion. It also meant a series of late-night brainstorming sessions and a launch event in another city. When I told Kartik, he feigned excitement for me, but his eyes were cold. "That's amazing, baby," he said, hugging me tightly. "But, a trip? For how long?" "Just 2 nights," I said, already defensive. "2 nights," he repeated, pulling back. "With who?" "That guy David from your team? The one you always say is so funny." David is married, Kartik. And yes, he'll be there along with 5 other people. It's work. That night, he manufactured a massive fight over nothing, the way I'd loaded the dishwasher. But it wasn't about the dishwasher. It was about the trip. The argument escalated until he was sobbing, clutching his chest, claiming he was having a panic attack at the thought of me being away, in a hotel, surrounded by other men. "I can't handle it, Grace," he cried. "I'll be a wreck. I won't sleep. What if something happens to you? What if someone tries something?" The next morning, I called my boss and told him I had a family emergency and had to pull out of the project. The disappointment in his voice was a physical blow, but the overwhelming relief on Kartik's face when I told him was my reward. A week later, he sat me down on the sofa, his expression one of solemn, loving concern. "Baby," he said, taking my hands in his. "I see how stress work makes you. The pressure, the deadlines, the drama, it's not good for you. And it's not good for us." He stroked my hair, his voice a hypnotic purr. "I make more than enough for both of us. Why don't you quit? You could take some time off, relax. Focus on yourself, on us. I want to take care of you completely. I want you all to myself." The offer was presented as the ultimate romantic gesture, the pinnacle of his devotion. And in my isolated, brainwashed state, I saw it that way too. A life without stress, without deadlines, without the constant anxiety of triggering his jealousy. A life where my only job was to be loved by him. It sounded like paradise. A month later, I served my notice. The cage was now economic as well as emotional. I had no friends, no job, no income of my own. I was completely and utterly dependent on him. For a while, it was a kind of paradise. A lazy, sun-drenched existence where our days were filled with long lunches, museum visits, and weekend trips he would plan meticulously. But I soon learned that my freedom was an illusion. He gave me a generous allowance on a credit card linked to his account, but he monitored every single purchase. A coffee with a former female colleague resulted in an interrogation. A new dress he hadn't personally approved of led to a sulk. He wasn't giving me money. He was leasing my compliance. The artist in me, the part of me that had once dreamed of Parsons, began to stir in the long, empty afternoons. I started sketching again, tentatively at first, then with a growing passion. It was a small, secret act of rebellion, a way of reconnecting with the Grace who had existed before Kartik. One day he came home early and found me at the dining table, surrounded by charcoal sketches, completely absorbed. He was silent for a long moment. I looked up, my heart pounding, expecting an explosion. Instead, he smiled. "These are incredible, Grace," he said, picking up a drawing of the city skyline from our window. "I forgot how talented you are. You should be doing something with this." My heart soared. He wasn't angry. He was proud. He encouraged me to set up a small studio space in our spare room. He bought me a new easel, expensive paints, the best paper. For a few blissful weeks, I felt a spark of my old self returning. A friend of a friend saw some of my work and offered me a small but exciting freelance commission, a series of illustrations for a local magazine article. It was the first creative opportunity I'd had in over a year. Kartik feigned support. "That's fantastic, baby. Of course you should do it." But as my deadline approached, his sabotage began. It was subtle, insidious, and always deniable. He would accidentally spill a glass of coffee on my finished sketches, forcing me to start over, his apologies profuse and dramatic. He would schedule important and unavoidable errands for me during the precious daylight hours I needed to work. "I'm so sorry, Grace, but my mother needs these documents delivered across town right now, and you're the only one I trust." The night before my deadline, I was working frantically, stressed but determined to finish. He came into my studio, a look of deep concern on his face. He stood behind me, looking at my final illustration. "It's good," he said, his tone hesitant. "But, are you sure about that color palette? Feels a little amateurish, don't you think? A bit obvious." He pointed to another section. "And that line work seems a little shaky. Are you tired, baby? Maybe you should rest." His critiques were couched in concern, but they were a series of well-aimed arrows designed to pierce my confidence. He picked apart every detail until my own creation looked ugly and inept to me. My confidence, already fragile, shattered. I missed my deadline. I told the magazine I couldn't complete the work, overcome with shame and a feeling of profound failure. Kartik held me as I cried, stroking my hair. "It's okay, baby," he murmured. "Maybe you're just not ready for that kind of pressure. It doesn't matter. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. You have me." He had to be the sole source of my validation, the only sun in my sky. Any other light had to be extinguished. My lowest point came during the holidays. We went to his parents' house for their annual Christmas Eve dinner. The house was filled with his extended family, a loud, boisterous clan who had always been polite but distant towards me. This year it was different. Isolated from my own family and friends, I felt like a foreign specimen under a microscope. I was a shell of my former self, quiet and anxious, my eyes constantly darting to Kartik, seeking his approval, reading his expression for cues on how to act, what to say. His cousin, a kind woman I had always liked, pulled me aside in the kitchen. "Grace, are you okay?" she asked, her voice low with concern. "You seem quiet. We missed the old you." Before I could answer, Kartik was there, his arm sliding around my waist, his smile as bright and false as the tinsel on the tree. "She's just tired," he said smoothly, answering for me. "I've been spoiling her too much." He gave my shoulder a squeeze that was just a little too tight, a silent warning. Later that night, his aunt asked me what I'd been up to since quitting my job. I opened my mouth to talk about my art, but Kartik cut in. "Grace has been focusing on making our house a home," he announced proudly. "She's a natural homemaker. It's her true calling." He was rewriting my identity in front of everyone, reducing me to a domestic accessory. And I just stood there, smiling, a silent, complicit partner in my own erasure. We left the party early because I had a headache. In the car, he was triumphant. "See how much they all love you. How much they love us together." he said, taking my hand. I felt a wave of profound, disorienting loneliness wash over me. I was surrounded by his family, living in his apartment, spending his money, loved by him, and I had never felt more alone in my entire life. I had become a ghost in my own story, a character in the fairy tale he was writing, and I was beginning to forget what my own handwriting looked like. The cage was locked, and I had handed him the key long ago, convinced it was the key to a castle. The final horrifying betrayal, the act that finally shattered the beautiful, suffocating cage he had built around me, came disguised as the biggest opportunity of Kartik's career. He had been chasing a major contract for his marketing firm for months, a deal that would elevate him from a successful boutique agency owner to a major player in the industry. The potential partner was a man named Rahul Sharma, a wealthy, older investor notorious for two things: his Midas touch in business and his sleazy, predatory reputation with women. Everyone knew about Rahul, but in a world where money screamed louder than morals, his behavior was dismissed as an unpleasant but acceptable quirk. Kartik was ecstatic when Rahul finally agreed to a dinner meeting, and he insisted it had to be at our home. "We need to impress him, Grace," he'd said, his eyes shining with a feverish, manic ambition I had never seen before. "This is everything. The final step. I need him to see our life, to see you. I need you to be charming." I knew what charming meant. It was code. It meant be beautiful, be accommodating, be agreeable. It meant laugh at his jokes even if they weren't funny. It meant make him feel powerful and important. I felt a knot of dread tighten in my stomach, but I pushed it down. This was important to him, which meant it had to be important to me. My purpose, after all, was to support his dreams. The night of the dinner, he stood over me as I got ready, directing my choices like a stylist preparing a model for a photo shoot. "Not that one," he said, dismissing the elegant but conservative black dress I had chosen. He went into my closet and pulled out a deep red dress, a slinky, silk number he had bought me months ago but I had never worn. It was beautiful, but it was also a little tighter, a little lower cut than I was comfortable with. "This one," he said, his eyes gleaming. "You look like a goddess in this one. Rahul will be impressed." The way he said the word made my skin crawl, but I put on the dress. From the moment Rahul walked in, his eyes, small and reptilian, roamed over my body like a physical, violating touch. He was older than I expected, with slicked back, dyed black hair and a soft, fleshy handshake that lingered for a moment too long. He oozed a kind of predatory confidence, the assurance of a man who was used to taking whatever he wanted. He complimented the apartment, but his eyes were on me. He complimented the wine, but his smile was directed at my body. The entire dinner was a tightrope walk of humiliation. He let his hand rest on the small of my back for a fraction too long as he passed behind my chair. He stood too close when I was clearing the plates, his boozy breath hot on my neck. He made suggestive jokes that weren't jokes at all, his gaze heavy and leering. "A woman as beautiful as you shouldn't be hiding away in a marketing agency, Kartik. She should be on a billboard." I shot desperate, pleading looks at Kartik across the table, my eyes begging him to intervene, to say something, to defend me. He saw everything. I know he did. I saw the flicker of recognition in his eyes, but he would just give me a tight, warning smile, a slight, almost imperceptible shake of his head that screamed, "Play along. Don't ruin this." The worst moment, the point of no return, came when Kartik was in the kitchen getting a bottle of brandy. I was in the living room gathering the coffee cups, my back to the door. Rahul cornered me. He stepped in front of me, blocking my path, his bulk trapping me against the sofa. He put his hand on my thigh, his thumb beginning to stroke the silk of my dress in slow, deliberate circles. I flinched, my entire body going rigid with revulsion and a sudden cold fear. "Kartik is a lucky man," Rahul said, his voice a greasy whisper that smelled of expensive scotch. "A very smart man, too. He knows that in business, sometimes you have to be willing to share your assets." I felt a wave of nausea so profound I thought I might be sick. I froze, paralyzed by a mixture of shock and terror. I tried to pull away, to twist my leg out from under his hand, but his grip tightened, his fingers digging into my skin. "Don't be shy," he murmured, leaning closer, his face uncomfortably near mine. "A smart girl like you knows how to play the game. We could make Kartik a very, very rich man tonight." I finally found my voice, though it came out as a choked, strangled whisper. "Please take your hand off me." He just laughed, a low guttural sound of pure entitlement. At that precise moment, Kartik walked back into the room, 2 brandy snifters in his hands. He stopped. He saw Rahul's hand on my leg. He saw the revulsion and terror on my face. He saw it all. And he did nothing. He didn't drop the glasses. He didn't yell. He didn't rush to my defense. He just smiled his plastic, accommodating host smile, walked calmly to the bar, and topped off Rahul's brandy glass. That was it. The spell was broken. The last, gossamer thin thread of my delusion snapped with a deafening internal crack. In that single horrifying instant of his inaction, I saw him with a terrifying absolute clarity. He wasn't the man who loved me too much. He was a man who didn't love me at all. I wasn't his partner. I was his possession. A tool to be used, an asset to be leveraged, a sacrifice to be made on the altar of his ambition. My fear, which had been a cold, paralyzing weight in my chest, was suddenly burned away by a white-hot, cleansing rage. I stood up so abruptly that my chair scraped loudly against the polished hardwood floor. I looked at Rahul, at his smug, leering face, and I slapped him. The sound cracked through the silent room like a gunshot. The bright red imprint of my hand bloomed on his fleshy cheek in a perfect, satisfying silhouette. Rahul's face contorted with shock, then a dark, ugly fury. Kartik rushed forward, but not to me. He went to Rahul, his hands flapping in a panicked, apologetic gesture. "Rahul, I am so sorry, she's had too much to drink tonight. She gets emotional sometimes." He was making excuses for me, for my justifiable rage. He turned to me, his eyes blazing with a cold fire I had never seen before. It wasn't the hot, jealous rage I was used to. This was the cold, pragmatic fury of a businessman whose multi-million-dollar deal had just been jeopardized. "Grace," he hissed, his voice dangerously low, each word a venomous dart. "Apologize to him. Now. Apologize." He wanted me to apologize. He wanted me to stand there, humiliated and violated, and apologize to the man who had sexually harassed me in my own home. A man he had invited in. A man he had served me up to on a silver platter as part of the dessert course. "Say you're sorry," he demanded, his jaw tight, his eyes like chips of ice. And that was the word. Sorry. For over a year my life had been a revolving, nauseating carousel of that word. His sorry for his rages, his sorry for his jealousy, his sorry for his broken promises. And my sorry, my endless soul-crushing sorry, for things I had never done. His apologies, I realized then, were meaningless. They were just a tool, a way to reset the cycle of abuse and begin again. But my sorry, my apology had to mean something. It had to mean recognizing a mistake and promising myself, with every fiber of my being, that I would never ever repeat it. And my biggest, most catastrophic mistake was letting him convince me that his abuse was a form of love. I looked from Kartik's furious, pleading face to Rahul's indignant one. I took a deep, steadying breath. "I am sorry," I said, my voice ringing with a clarity and strength that surprised even me. The relief that washed over Kartik's face was immediate and palpable, but it didn't last. "I am sorry," I continued, my eyes locked on his, "that I didn't see you for who you really are sooner. I am sorry that I ever believed your cage was a castle. And I am sorry that I am not sorry for this." I gestured to the red mark on Rahul's cheek. "He deserved it. And you? You deserve each other." I turned and walked out of the room. I didn't run. I walked. I went into our bedroom, his bedroom, and I locked the door. I pulled my old duffel bag from the back of the closet and began to pack. I could hear their raised voices from the living room, a brief, sharp argument, and then the sound of the front door slamming as Rahul left. A moment later, Kartik was at the bedroom door, banging on it with his fist. "Grace, open this door. Open it right now. You have no idea what you've just done," he screamed, the cold fury now mixed with a note of panic. I ignored him. I packed my essentials. My wallet, my keys, a few changes of clothes, the small shoebox-sized container of sentimental things, old photos, letters, my grandmother's locket, that I had managed to keep hidden from his various purges of my past. He continued to yell, his voice shifting seamlessly from rage to pleading, cycling through all the old familiar tactics that had worked so effectively for so long. "Grace, baby, please. I'm sorry. I was just stressed about the deal. I wasn't thinking. Please don't do this." The tears came next, the loud, gulping, theatrical sobs that had always been my undoing. "I can't live without you. I'll die, Grace. I swear I'll die without you." But this time the words had no power. The threats were hollow. The tears were just water. They were the tools of a manipulator whose subject had finally become immune. I looked at myself in the full-length mirror on the closet door. My face was pale, my eyes wide and dark, but for the first time in a very long time, they were clear. I saw a woman, not a possession. Person, not a project. I zipped my bag, took one last deep breath, and unlocked the door. He was slumped against the wall in the hallway, his face a perfect, practiced caricature of grief. When he saw me with the bag in my hand, he lunged for me, his fingers closing around my arm like a vice. "You're not leaving," he said, his voice a low, threatening growl. I looked down at his hand on my arm, at the white knuckles, then back up at his face. "Yes," I said, my own voice quiet, calm, and utterly devoid of the fear he expected to see there. "I am." I pulled my arm from his grasp with a steady, surprising strength I didn't know I possessed. I walked past him, down the hallway filled with the ghosts of our toxic dance, and I didn't look back. I walked out the front door of the beautiful apartment, leaving the key on the polished console table. I walked out of the fairy tale he had constructed, and into the cool, clean, anonymous air of the night. I was alone. I was terrified. I had no idea where I was going or what I would do next, but I was free. I stood on the street corner, the city lights blurring through the tears that were finally starting to fall. They weren't tears of sadness or regret. They were tears of relief, of release. I pulled out my phone. My fingers trembled as I scrolled through my contacts. There was only one person I could call. I hesitated for only a second, a flicker of shame and fear, and then I pressed the button. She answered on the second ring. "Grace." Maya's voice was a shock, a sound from another lifetime. It was filled with sleepiness, and then a sudden sharp concern. "Oh my God, Grace, are you okay? What's wrong?" "Maya," I sobbed, the single word containing a universe of apology and desperation. Can I come over?" There was no hesitation. "No, I told you so." No anger. Just the immediate, unwavering loyalty I had thrown away. "Of course," she said, her voice firm and steady, a lighthouse in my storm. "Come home." And for the first time that night, I knew where I was going. I was going to find the woman I had been before the cage, and I was going to rebuild my world one small, free, gloriously ordinary day at a time. The fairy tale was over, and my real life, my own life, was just beginning. I thought his love was the story of my life, but I was wrong. It was just the dark first chapter of a much better story, my own. Thank you for listening. Subscribe for more videos.